Hey church, how's it going? I'm so glad you're here this morning. My name is Pastor Steve. I'm our children's pastor here at North Lake, and I'm just glad you're here today. Hey, I wanted to tell you, we are continuing our series on Silence and Solitude in this book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. It's a great book, and Mike has a great message for us today. I'm looking forward to that. Hey, before we get going, I just wanted to do a quick warm-up with you. I'm going to give you 1 minute to lean over to somebody near you or call someone or text someone and just tell them one thing that you think is unique and special about them. Go.
feel your presence. I could just stay right where I am and hope to feel you, hope to feel something again. I could hold on to who I am and never let you change me from the inside. I could be safe, oh, I could be safe here in your arms and never leave home, never let these walls down. But you have called me higher, you have called me deeper, and I'll go where you lead me, Lord. You have called me higher, you have called me deeper, and I'll go where you lead me, Lord. You lead me. I could hold on to who I am and never let you change me from the inside. I could be safe, oh, I could be safe here in your arms and never leave, never let these walls down. But you have called me higher, you have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You have called me higher, you have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You lead me. You lead me, I will be yours, Lord. I will be yours for all my life. I will be yours, Lord. I will be yours for all my life. I will be yours, Lord. I will be yours for all my life. So let your mercy. I will be yours, Lord. I will be yours for all my life. So let your mercy light the path before me. But you have called me higher, you have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You have called me higher, you have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You have called me higher, you have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You have called me higher, you have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You lead me. You lead me.
My name is Andy Vandermeulen, and I'm an elder here at Northlake. And this morning we're going to come together and celebrate communion together. This is something we do as a community of believers each month, and I'm really excited to be able to share it with you. So I know it's a little bit different celebrating it at home, so if you want to pause the video, take a few minutes and grab some bread and juice that you may have around, you could do so and then come on back. So to start off, I want to read a familiar passage from 1 Corinthians 11:24, where Jesus, during the Last Supper, gives thanks, breaks the bread, and then says, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." I've been focusing in on the word remembrance this week. Why does Jesus ask us to remember? If you look throughout our world today, there are lots of examples of things that we use to remember something. So some things like maybe like a keychain or a souvenir from a favorite vacation, or a ticket stub from an awesome game that you went to, or something more meaningful like a wedding ring to remember your wedding vows, or a tombstone to remember somebody that passed away. As we look throughout Scripture, God is constantly asking the nation of Israel to make monuments to remember what He has done. In Joshua chapter 4, after crossing the Jordan River and into the Promised Land, God tells Joshua to have the 12 tribes of Israel take a stone from the river and place them where they camped that night. Why does God ask him to do this? Joshua explains in verse 6, "That this may be a sign among you. When your children ask in times to come, 'What do these stones mean to you?' then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord." In the same way, communion is a symbol that we use to remember Jesus' death on the cross. As humans, we are prone to forget. We get distracted, we wander off. In celebrating communion each month, it brings us back to focus on Jesus' death on the cross and remember what He has done for us. This past weekend, we had an elders retreat, and each of us shared the physical location where we put our trust in Jesus. For me, it was when I was 6 years old at a 5-day club at Gil and Peggy Reeves' house. And some of you may remember they used to live right across the street from Geneva Elementary School. So I remember sitting in their dining room and Peggy presenting the gospel to me and that becoming real to me at that moment. So I know a lot of times when it comes to communion, it's easy to get distracted by the world and feel like you don't have enough time to spend with God. Or you feel guilt or shame that you're not in the right place with God. I was really encouraged by the message from Derek Archer just a couple months back at the beginning of the year, where he mentioned just a great reminder that we're only a 10-second prayer away from where we want to be with God. So as I was thinking about that, a song popped into my head. It's an oldie but a goodie, "Created Me a Clean Heart" by Keith Green. Which is based off of Psalm 51, 10 through 12. So let this be our 10-second prayer to God. "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from thy presence, O Lord, and take not thy Holy Spirit from me. Restore unto me the joy of thy salvation, and renew a right spirit within me." So I want to take a few moments and spend some time remembering that first time that you accepted Christ. Think back to where you were at, who you were with, and what you were feeling. Remember the moment that you realized that He died for you. After a few moments, I will lead us in taking the bread and cup together. And when He gave thanks, He broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, after supper, He took the cup, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this whenever you drink in remembrance of me. For whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until He comes." Thank you for celebrating communion with me this morning.
Hey everybody, I'm back. few weeks ago, in fact, it was the day I was getting ready to record my last message on heaven. I spotted Luke. He was in the hallway sitting in the chair reading this book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, which I hadn't read yet. So I knew Luke was up for teaching somewhere in this series. So I said, "Hey, Luke, what are you teaching on?" He goes, "Silence, Solitude, and Sabbath." I looked at him and I said, "Oh man, Luke, I am passionate about those topics, so don't mess it up." I was kind of joking, but he looked right back at me and he said, "Well, if you're so passionate about them, why don't you teach on them?" And the next day I spotted him and Josh sitting in the hallway, and I knew they were talking. And basically the conversation was very short. Josh said, "So you're passionate about these topics?" I said, "Yep." He goes, "Well, you're doing it." So in our book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, John Mark Comer relays a story, and I've heard this story a few times. And if you've read the book, you read the story. But as we get ready to start today, I want to read you this story one more time. Once there was a man who was traveling through the jungle in Africa with a team of local men that he had hired to carry his purchases from local markets back to the boat. It was a few days' walk, and the man was keen to catch the boat. So he urged the men to move faster and faster with each passing day. One day, after moving at a terrific speed, the entire team of men sat down and refused to move. No amount of urging, encouraging, threatening, or harassment could get them to move. Finally, he approached the manager of the team, and he said he would pay extra if the men would just get up and begin moving. But the manager was in agreement with the men that they could not move yet. "Why?" asked the man. "Because they are waiting for their souls to catch up." Waiting for their souls to catch up. Do you ever feel like you've lost your soul? That you're so busy, you're so overwhelmed with life, that you have so much packed into every single day, every single hour, every second of your life. And then one morning you look in the mirror and you go, "What has become of me? I'm so frazzled and always in a rush." The three spiritual practices that we're going to look at over the next 2 weeks. That's right, I said 2 weeks. You didn't think I could pack all of this into one, did you? I think just about all of us intuitively know the importance of these three practices. And I'm also betting that we all experience them a lot more often in our lives than we think we do. Go with me for a minute. Let's say that you are headed out on vacation with the whole family. You pack up the car, everybody's excited, you hop in, you start heading out for your trip. The music is blasting, the kids are in the back seat, you got the dog barking behind you, your wife and you are sharing excitement for where you're headed. After driving for a few hours, you're getting close to your destination, and it's a place you've never been before. And in fact, you're not even quite sure the last couple turns you need to make. So what is it that you intuitively do? If you're like me, you probably reach over and you go like this. That's right. You turn the music down, and then you probably say this: "Hey everybody, quiet down for a minute. I'm trying to concentrate on where we're going." Why do we do that? Because intuitively we know that excess noise makes it hard to focus. You need it quiet for a few minutes so you can think and focus on where you're going. These three practices that we're talking about, they are the magic pill that you need to swallow in order to find your soul again. You know what's even more important than finding your soul? Finding your God. Of course, He's always there, but sometimes, maybe most of the time, we move too quickly, have too much going on in our lives, and too much noise in order to see Him and hear Him. And what would be more important than seeing and hearing the God that we have committed our lives to following? Let's pray. Father God, I pray right now that you would use my words to help all of us, myself first and foremost, to learn the pace and the rhythms of silence and solitude and Sabbath. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. In prepping for these messages, I always love to bounce my messages off a couple people here on our staff. And after doing that, I got this question asked to me a couple times. They said, Mike, everything you're saying is really good, but you haven't answered this question for me. Why? Why should I bother pursuing silence, solitude, and Sabbath? Why should I try to reorient my lives in order to make time for all of these things? What was their point? I think their point was this. What if you and I like our busy lives? What if the pursuits that we fill up our days with are things that we don't want to let go of? What if parents don't mind running their kids all over to soccer practices, music events, and sporting things? What if we like the activities? What if we like our hobbies? What if we like the busyness and we don't want to let it go? I think underneath that, we've got a couple things going on. Sometimes I think we wear busyness like a badge of honor. We feel like if we're busy, we have more value. The busier we are, the more value we have. Or maybe our lives do reflect our values, but we're valuing the wrong things. So before we get into anything regarding these three words, let's address the big question of why we should bother doing any of this. I'll give you a few reasons, and here's the first one. We're called to follow the lifestyle of Jesus. Let me tell you a little story about somebody who's living an unprecedented life right now. His name is Tom Brady. Maybe you've heard of him. He's the quarterback of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and before that, he was the quarterback for the New England Patriots for 20 years. I did a little research, and he's got so many records, I don't have time to tell you about them, but I'm going to give you three numbers that sum up Tom Brady. 43, 10, and 7. 43 is his age, an unprecedented age for a professional athlete of any sport, and yet at age 43, he is not slowing down. 10, this is the number of Super Bowls he's played in, and 7, the number of Super Bowls he has won. As I mentioned, Brady has played for 21 seasons, which means you could divide his career into 3 7-season chunks. And I heard one sports commentator say, if you divided his career into 3 7-year chunks, he would make the Hall of Fame in each of those 3 seasons. In other words, Tom Brady is a 3-time Hall of Famer who still isn't slowing down. Now, what if I asked you if you were a little bit in awe of Tom Brady? I think all of us, especially us sports fans, would say absolutely. Now, what if I asked you if you would like to be as good as Tom Brady? Again, all of us sports fans would say 100% yes. I wish I was as good of a quarterback as Tom Brady. Now, what if I asked you if you were willing to become a disciple of Tom Brady? Do you know what a disciple of Tom Brady would do? Everything that he does. In fact, your goal would be to become a clone. That you would sleep when he sleeps, you would eat when he eats, work when he works. Your behaviors, in fact, your entire life, the goal would be to clone or copy Tom Brady exactly. Not only would you have to change your behaviors, but most importantly, you would have to change your values to match his values. If you just tried to tweak your life a little bit, or add some of the things that Brady does into your life, but not add other things, you would fail at being his disciple, and you would fail at being as good as he is. A lot of aspiring athletes want to be as good as Brady, but very few, if any, will copy the lifestyle of Brady. So, getting back to our point, why should we pursue silence, solitude, and Sabbath? As our author, John Comer, puts it, if you want to experience the life of Jesus, you have to adopt the lifestyle of Jesus. Here's the rub, though. Some of us, we read this quote and we think to ourselves, well, that's fine. I don't want to adopt the lifestyle of Jesus. That's too hard. I just want the rewards that Jesus offers without having to align my values and life with his. But here's the problem with that. Jesus didn't make that an option. Whenever someone comes face to face with the truths of Jesus, you come to a fork in the road, and that fork only has 2 options. Jesus showed us which fork in the road to take, and then he said, "Come, follow me. Become my disciple." Or in other words, Jesus' invitation, the pathway he's called us to, is to pattern our lifestyle after his. That's one fork. The only other fork you can take, don't follow him. That's not the only reason why we should pursue these spiritual practices. Comer quotes Stephen Covey in the book we're all reading as saying that we achieve inner peace when our schedule is aligned with our values. Comer also states that although that line isn't in Scripture, that he thinks that Jesus, if he heard it, would smile and nod. Now, I very so slightly disagree with that statement. The statement I believe that Jesus would nod to is this: we will achieve inner peace in our lives when our schedule aligns with God's values. This is the second reason we should pursue these practices. We're called to change our values to match God's values. If you want inner peace in your life, it's a daily surrendering of what I think and replacing it with what He thinks. In other words, it's these WWJD bracelets that Josh passed out to us last week. In all things. There's one more question I want to address about these practices. Another question that one of our staff mentioned to me. Will pursuing these practices be worth my time? The answer to that question, my answer to that question, is the third point. We're designed to work from rest, not rest from work. Here's another story for you. Back in the days before I started mountain biking, there was a brief period in time, 3 or 4 years, where I tried to get into jogging. I would usually just jog 3 or 4 times a week, usually 5K or less, couple miles. And I had a favorite loop by my house that I liked to do 2 or 3 times a week. So one of these summer days, I was out doing this loop. It always took me right around 25 minutes. And there was a friend of mine that was out. In fact, many of you know this friend. His name was Norval Magnuson. So I stopped and chatted with Norval. He could see, though, that I was in the middle of a workout and he didn't want to hold me up. So we talked for like a minute and a half, and then I finished my run. So when I looked at my time, I fully expected to see a time of about 27 minutes. But do you know what happened when I looked at my watch? My time for that run, including the 1.5 minute break, was 25 minutes. Now I share that because there's a principle and a myth embedded in here. The myth is this: if we work harder, pack more into our days, and fill our lives to the brim with the things that keep us busy, then we will get more done. It's a lie. The truth, you will be far more effective if you work less, but you work out of a fully charged battery, one that is abiding in the power of Christ. The principle is to work from rest. We get this backwards all the time. We look at rest as a way to take a break from our work. We're going to talk more about this idea next week when we focus on Sabbath. However, silence and solitude are critically important practices for us to adopt so that we will be more effective in our work, and most importantly, in accomplishing the good deeds that God has prepared in advance for us to step into. So there's 3 reasons why we need these practices. One warning though, silence, solitude, and Sabbath are not the goal. In fact, as Comer states in the book, and I remind you, like all habits, they are a means to an end. This is where well-meaning religious people like myself go wrong. When the spiritual disciplines, Bible reading, prayer, Sabbath, and so on, become an end in and of themselves, you've arrived at legalism. Therein lies death, not life. The end is life to the full with Jesus. All right, with all of that said, today we're going to focus on silence and solitude, and next week we're going to focus on Sabbath. Silence and solitude are perhaps the easiest spiritual practices to understand, the hardest to do regularly, and perhaps the most important practices that we have. Let me say that again. Silence and solitude are the easiest practices to understand, the hardest to do regularly, and the most important ones that we have. So let me define these two words. I'm a simple guy, so I'm going to keep it really simple. Silence is turning off the noise. Solitude means just you and God. So for the rest of this message, whenever I say those words, that's what I mean. Turning off the noise in our lives and getting away just you and your Father. So diving in, I've got 3 big points to make today. Number 1 is this. Without silence and solitude, it's impossible to hear God's voice. You want proof? Just look at the life of Jesus. Now think about it. If anyone didn't need to spend time with God, it was Jesus, right? I mean, Jesus was God. Jesus was with God. We're told that everything that was created by Jesus, for Jesus. He was, after all, the great I am. He was there at the beginning, he'll be there at the end, and he's here right now. And yet, he regularly got away and spent time in silence and solitude with his Father. Here's just a few examples. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the lake. Jesus went out on a mountainside to pray, and he spent the night praying to God. When Jesus heard that John the Baptist had been beheaded, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. There's many more examples where those came from, but do you see what I'm driving at? Jesus, even though he was one with God, still found it necessary to get away to solitary places to be with God. Why? I can think of many reasons, but here's just a couple. God most often speaks to us in whispers. Remember the story of Elijah found in 1 Kings 19, where God appears to Elijah in order to strengthen him. First comes a powerful wind, then comes a powerful earthquake, and last comes a fire. But God was not in any of those. And then came what? A gentle whisper. And that was where Elijah found strength from God. Try this experiment sometime. Next time you want to get someone's attention, instead of shouting at them, whisper to them and see what happens. That's not the only thing, though, that Jesus knew. The second thing, he understood that he had to turn off the noise to have the quality time with his Father that he desperately needed. Many of you know my son. I've just got one child, Brennan. He's 10 years old, almost 11, and Brennan is an amazing young man. He's full of life. He's full of joy. He's full of energy. He wakes up almost every morning between 6:30 and 7, and he hits the ground running. He lives life out loud. He's always singing, sharing, laughing, talking. Brennan feeds off of being around other people. One of our common struggles in our home is Julie and I are both introverts, and we feed off silence, we feed off solitude, and Brennan is the exact opposite. In fact, I can remember a few weeks ago, one morning, it was like 7 a.m., and this was one of those mornings when I really needed some peace and quiet. And Brennan, he was in his world doing his own thing, and I finally kind of snapped, and I looked at him, and I said, Brennan, I am an introvert, and if I don't get time to myself, I get really cranky. Without skipping a beat, he looked right back at me, and he goes, Dada, I'm an extrovert, and if I don't get time with other people, I get really cranky. Here's a little side tip. When an introvert and an extrovert live together, the extrovert always wins. Here's the point of that story, though. Brennan's brain goes 100 miles an hour. That's who he is, and I love that about him. But when I have something really important to tell him, here's what it looks like. I get his attention, and I say this, Brennan, stop what you're doing for a minute. Turn off the music, put the iPad down, look me right in the eyes. We need to be in the car in 10 minutes. Now tell me what I just said to you. Got it? Great. Do you know what the regular practice of silence and solitude are? They're a built-in way for God to get us to stop, slow down, turn off the music, look him in the eyes, and listen. And then repeat back what we just heard him say. You know what active listening is? Most of us, in fact, maybe all of us, are not very good at active listening. We usually halfway listen. I know I do. And really what we're doing is we're partly listening, but thinking about the response we're going to give as soon as the person talking gives us 1 second to jump in. Active listening means you're listening to understand, and when the person is done speaking, you're going to repeat back to them what you heard them say. That's active listening. Silence and solitude are a way for God to make sure that we are actively listening to him. Jesus knew that he could hear God's voice the best if he spent time in silence and solitude. And if Jesus, the Son of God, needed to hear his Father's voice, how much more do we need to hear it? Henry Nouwen, great spiritual leader, said this: "Without solitude, it is virtually impossible to live a spiritual life. We do not take the spiritual life seriously if we do not set aside some time to be with God and listen to him." Again, as I said, without silence and solitude, it's virtually impossible to hear God's voice. Let's look at a familiar passage in Scripture to get us to my second big point. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. This leads me to my second big point. Silence and solitude lead us to getting something that we can only get from God. Without moments of silence and solitude in our lives, moments where we can look our Father in the eyes, turn off the noise, and hear his voice, without this, we will never be able to abide or remain in him. Now, let me be clear. I'm using this somewhat in a figurative way. I'm not talking about gaining or losing our salvation, or that somehow we gain or lose God's Spirit. But what I am talking about is a simple principle, and that's this. For any friendship, for any relationship to grow, you have to spend quality time with each other. That's the minimum requirement. And without that, the relationship will fall apart. And so it is in our relationship with God. All I'm saying is this: we cannot maintain an effective, abiding, or remaining relationship with God if we never practice silence and solitude. Jesus modeled this for us. But in saying that Jesus modeled this for us, I'm not saying the only reason Jesus did it was to show us that we should do it. He did it because he needed it. Jesus needed it at the start of a busy day, at the end of a busy day, in the middle of a busy day. He needed it in the morning, in the evening, and sometimes he needed it in the middle of the night. And why did he need it? He didn't do it to check a box. He did it because those times spent with his Father gave him something that he could not get any other way. Jesus needed to hear God's voice. He needed to feel God's presence. He needed to understand God's will for him and to feel his power. Jesus needed God to guide him, to settle him, to give him peace. Jesus needed his Abba Father, and he knew that only in times of silence and solitude could he get that which he needed the most. Jesus spent time in silence and solitude for all these reasons and more, and so must we if we are going to abide in him. You want to know something about me? When I teach, I don't like making super strong, bold statements. You know why? because I'm afraid of offending people. And I don't like that. I want to be liked. And yet right here, I feel the need to make a pretty strong statement. And I first make it to myself and then all of you. And it's this: I am a fool, and you are too, if you think that you can live the lifestyle of Jesus without setting aside times of silence and solitude. A few weeks ago, I talked about this void in our hearts that we keep trying to fill up, and yet the only thing that can fill this void is God. Not God filling in the cracks, not God squeezing himself into our busy lives, but God first in everything. God first. Without it, we cannot effectively abide in him. All right, I've got one more point to make, and it's this: silence and solitude are the most important spiritual practices. I remember a number of years ago, a study was done surveying Christians all over the nation, asking them a number of questions, including questions about what helped them to grow closer to God the most. The company that conducted the survey was a secular company working alongside with the church, and they came back with results that shocked them. Something they call the vanilla factor. The vanilla factor is two words that come from ice cream. So we all know, in the United States at least, that vanilla is the most popular flavor of ice cream. But that doesn't tell the whole story. It's not just the most popular, but it's the most popular by a factor of more than 2-1. It's overwhelmingly the most popular flavor. So regarding the survey, this company said in all the years of doing all sorts of surveys, they'd never seen something so predictive that if people would do this, it would be a guarantee of spiritual growth. You know what it was? The vanilla factor was this: reading, understanding, and applying Scripture, God's Word, into our lives. So let me ask you a question. When do you most effectively read, understand, and apply God's Word in your life? In silence, in solitude. It's in our quiet times that we spend with Him. Now, it's important that I make this point. Reading God's Word does not lead to spiritual growth. Reading God's Word and understanding it isn't the vanilla factor. The vanilla factor is reading God's Word, understanding it, and applying it to our lives. In other words, the vanilla factor is reading God's Word and hearing God's voice as we read it. That's the vanilla factor. I remember about 6 years ago, I received an incredible gift from this church in the form of a sabbatical. And right in the middle of that sabbatical, I had 3 days and 2 nights that have become one of the highlights of my life. On that 3 days and 2 nights, I went away for a weekend to a spot on Lopez Island. I brought very little with me. I brought a book to read. I was going through The Lord of the Rings for like the 20th time. I brought my Bible, a journal, my camera, and some clothes, and that was about it. You know what I did? I slowed down. I kayaked every day. I used my camera to focus myself on nature and the things around me. I prayed. I listened. I journaled. I heard God's voice. I took a long, deep breath, and I found strength when I did that. Those 3 days were not just the highlight of my entire sabbatical, they're the highlight of maybe the last 20 years of my life. And I love Comer's statement in the book when he says, "The wilderness isn't the place of weakness, it's the place of strength." What is the place of strength? The place of strength is when we are most reliant on God, when His voice is the loudest, when His will becomes ours, when His values are our values. Then and only then will all of our worries and fears melt away and be replaced by the security and peace that comes from being loved by our Abba Father. All right, I've got a few closing points to make, but before I make them, I've invited a friend of mine to come up and share with us. So this is a good friend, and he shared with me that he read this book too. And about a couple of months ago, he started setting his alarm every morning and getting up 30 minutes earlier, spending that time in silence and solitude. So I've asked him to come and share. I'm going to ask him a few questions, but I want him to come and share with us right now. Here we go.
Hello, North Lakers. My name is Josh Wilson. I am the interim lead pastor at a church called North Lake.
Are you sure about that?
I think so.
Okay. So Josh, you told me a couple months ago you started setting your alarm and getting up early and spending time in silence and solitude. Why?
Yeah, I really did it after reading this book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And it was about the middle of December where I thought, man, we're going to be doing this as a church and I have to try this. Like, I have to see the impact that it's going to make in my life. And so I set an alarm for actually an hour before I would normally wake up so that I had enough space to see how much time would it take to set aside space to spend time with the Lord and just be in his presence.
Now, as a sidebar, this is a guy with a full-time job. He's a YouTuber. He's got 2 little kids in his house, a wife that he adores, and family commitments. If he can find time in his life for silence and solitude, anybody can. Now, that's a little side note. Second question, what have you learned doing this, or what tips can you give us? Because for some of us, this is a really intimidating, scary thought that maybe some people have never tried.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I learned is how little time I actually have in quietness and stillness. Not just before the Lord, but I think in all cases, it's really hard for me as an extrovert who is a person who likes to get a lot done to just have peace and quiet and not be distracted. And so that was like the first thing that I realized. And the second thing was like how much I've needed time just one-on-one with the Lord in quietness. So my biggest tip for people if they want to try this is set aside time where you can be alone. And not just that, but I found for me, quietness is key. If I wake up early and Macy, our 1-year-old, is awake and like making noise, it's really hard for me to focus on the Lord. Or if you hear any cracks, or I'm now walking my neighbor's dog, and so I've tried to, hey, can I have this solitude and silence before the Lord outside walking a dog? And I realized that doesn't work for me. It might work for you, but being alone in silence, so for me that's early in the morning in the living room, outside of your bed or anywhere that you're used to sleeping so that you're awake, and grab a cup of coffee if you need one, or a cup of water, and I would say sit in a posture of readiness and just relax. And my other biggest tip, it's hard. It's hard to start, and your brain starts wandering. You start thinking about your to-do list for the day, or for me, I read my Bible afterwards. So I think about, oh yeah, what did I read yesterday? Or what do I want to read? Or who am I going to pray for? Which sounds kind of cheesy, but it's true. Like, that gets in the way too. And I would say just what I do over and over again, and I had to do it this morning too, is I just have to meditate on one thought. And for me, the thought is, be still and know that I am God. And I just say to myself, I have to be still and know that God is God. And oftentimes I find that the Holy Spirit puts in me attributes of who God is that I can reflect on, or ways that God has been faithful or caring in my life. And just getting in quietness, the thoughts start rolling and you start realizing, man, I really am in communion with my Lord.
Okay, final big question. Is it worth it? Like, have you actually seen any benefits in your life? Come on, is it really worth it?
If I say no, does that wreck your message? No, the answer is absolutely. Like, really the first week that I did it, I just asked myself, like, how have I not done this? I felt more at peace. I felt calm. If you've ever gone into a difficult conversation, I found if you pray and you just like take a minute and take a big deep breath and just let your shoulders relax, it's like, man, now that conversation's a lot easier. In the same way, silence and solitude before the Lord before a day gives you rest and relaxation and leaves space for the Lord for the rest of your day. So it's provided huge dividends for me at work, in my relationship with Kristen and the family, in my relationship with my coworkers, and I would encourage anybody to try it. It's really good.
Cool. Thanks for sharing.
No problem.
Now get out of here.
Got to get back to my job at my big tootin' flutin' church. Yeah, see you later.
All right, church, you've heard the message. Now it's homework time. And first, let me say this, that for many of us, the practices of silence and solitude are a little bit scary. And that's why I love that word practice. It's something that you're going to need to start practicing. And the more you practice it, the better you will get at these practices. You will get comfortable doing this. I also want to give you a couple of warnings, though. Avoid the extremes. Maybe on one extreme, you get really legalistic about this and you start pursuing silence and solitude so much and you realize that you miss the whole point of it, which is connecting with God. The other extreme is don't get lazy about it. Don't fall into the trap that you don't really need these things. If Jesus needed them, you and I need them. All right, here's your homework, and it comes in two parts. The first is a daily challenge. The daily challenge is to spend 5 minutes a day in silence and solitude. Now, for some of you, you're like going, 5 minutes? That's easy, I can do that. And others of you, you're like thinking, 5 minutes? You want me to sit in silence for 5 minutes? Well, I picked 5 on purpose. I think 5 is a good place to start for all of us. And here's what I'll say. For those to whom this whole idea is scary or crazy, and you're not used to spending time in silence and solitude, I would encourage you in those 5 minutes, maybe spend the first minute or two just focusing your mind and thanking God on who He is, listing some of the attributes that you're thankful for, and then spend a couple minutes just being still and quiet. For those of you who think that 5 minutes is way too easy and you already have good times with God, well, I'm going to encourage you to do this with your 5 minutes. After you've had your vine time or your quiet time with the Lord, spend 5 minutes in complete and utter silence and try to focus on this one thing. Father, do you have anything to say to me right now? And then for 5 minutes, just listen. All right, the second part of your homework, let me tell you a story first. When Brennan was a lot younger, like ages 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or so, he and I used to do this thing called Boys Club. We would do it every Saturday morning. See, Brennan's always been an early riser, so I thought, Saturday, that's the one morning I can get up early with B, get him out of the house, and make sure that Julie has one quiet morning a week where she can ease into the day. So I'd pick Brennan up about 6 or 6:30. Well, not pick him up. I lived with him. Brennan and I would hop in the car at about 6:30, and we would head downtown to the downtown Starbucks, which isn't there anymore, but it was down on Holly Street. And we'd hop out of the car. We'd go walking around all over downtown. If we got lucky, there'd be a train to come by. In the spring and summer, the market would start setting up, and we got to know some of the people. And then after doing that for about an hour, we'd come back to Starbucks. We'd eat breakfast, I'd get some coffee, we'd often bring a game to play or a book to read, and we would have some boys club time. Just me and Brennan, father and son. And this brings me to my second challenge. Sometime in the next week, I want you to spend 1 hour in silence and solitude, just you and your father. Now, before you think that's impossible, that's way too hard, think of it like this. It's boys club time. Or for you ladies, this is daddy-daughter time. It's an hour where you get to spend just you and your father. And this is a time for you to share with him and let him share with you. For me, I'm going to take a walk somewhere, probably on a trail in the woods by myself. And I'm just going to thank God for who He is and allow my heart and my mind to be still before Him and hang out with my Abba Father, Daddy God. So, there's only 2 rules for silence and solitude. Whether it's the 5 minutes or the 1 hour, the rules are the same. Rule number 1, turn off the noise, all of it. Rule number 2, it's just you and God and nobody else. So to close, I want Jesus to have the final word today. And there is a moment in Luke's gospel that perfectly illustrates everything I've shared with you. So let's read it together. As they continued their travel, Jesus entered a village. A woman by the name of Martha welcomed him and made him feel quite at home. She had a sister, Mary, who sat before the master, hanging on every word he said. But Martha was pulled away by all she had to do in the kitchen. Later, she stepped in, interrupting them. Master, don't you care that my sister has abandoned the kitchen to me? Tell her to lend me a hand. The master said, Martha, dear Martha, you're fussing far too much and you're getting yourself all worked up over nothing. One thing only is essential, and Mary has chosen it. It's the main course, and it won't be taken from her. Let's pray. Father God, I pray that we would feast on the main course, that we would learn to look forward to times of silence and solitude where we can hang on every word you say to us. I pray this week as we all try to experience short moments and a longer moment with you, I pray that you would flood our hearts and minds and show us the incredible joy that we can get by hanging out with you, our Heavenly Father. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. Do your homework. I'm going to check up on you next week when we talk about Sabbath.